Happy Thursday, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Call Sheet Daily podcast here at the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Kevin Smith. It is Thursday, the day that we call the portal here on our Call Sheet program. The portal is our college football conversation. Going to be the last time we do the portal as a standalone show for a while. As I mentioned on Tuesday, format here at the Call Sheet is changing. We've been doing a daily show Monday through Friday since January, coming up on 200 shows. But beginning on Monday, we're going to go to a Monday, Wednesday, Friday format so that I can throw my time into some other projects, specifically video breakdown work and analysis, which is going to be heavy on our YouTube channel here at Fans First. Eventually going to have an Instagram page and more contributions to the Pro Football Insiders site. If you get an opportunity, subscribe to our Pro Football Insiders YouTube channel. That's doing really well. So there's some exciting things going on at PFI. And I'm going to be throwing myself more into that, trying to figure out, hey, how can we best maximize our coverage of the 2025 football season, both at the collegiate and pro level. So again, starting Monday, Wednesday, Friday shows. So today will be the last episode of the portal for a little bit. Definitely still going to cover college football, just not necessarily do it as its own standalone. And today's conversation is linked to the NFL because the question we're asking today is whether or not the 2026 quarterback class, the college quarterback class, which coming into this season, many thought would be one of the best in years, the best potential crop of collegiate quarterbacks who are draft eligible in years. But 3 weeks into the college season, the returns have been less than encouraging. Is the 2026 quarterback class overrated? Probably too early to answer that question, but we can begin to get a read on some of these prospects, and we'll talk about all that on today's show. Before we do that, let's look at some of the NFL teams who might be in the quarterback sweepstakes in next spring's draft. How many teams are seeking a first-round quarterback? How many teams are headed into that draft excited, hopefully, about this potential crop and thinking, hey, we can get our franchise guy here? Well, I think there's absolutely 5 and maybe a 6th. And who knows, the way things transpire in this year's NFL season, it could wind up even being more than 6. But there's definitely 6 teams we can mention here. Right at the top, you have the Cleveland Browns, who drafted 2 quarterbacks last year, but they took them in rounds 3 and 5, Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders respectively. I think more than anything, they would love to get a good read on Dylan Gabriel this year because he seems to be the guy that they feel may potentially have the ability to be their starter. I think they see Shedeur Sanders as a developmental prospect. Having Shedeur Sanders on the roster would by in no means discourage them from taking a quarterback in the first round next year. Cleveland's got a couple of first round picks. They could move up near the top of the draft. You know, they might wind up at the top of the draft with their record anyway. So they're going to have to make some decisions about Dylan Gabriel in order to know what direction to head when the draft comes around. New Orleans is in a very similar boat. They took Tyler Shuck in, I think it was round 2 last year, 2 or 3. I believe it was 2 in April's draft. They're going to have to get a referendum on him. They're currently starting Spencer Rattler. I don't know if they're married to either. If New Orleans winds up with a top 3 pick, which they very well may, they're definitely going to be in on the quarterback sweepstakes as well. You have the Indianapolis Colts, who are currently starting Daniel Jones. 2 weeks in, Daniel Jones has looked excellent. The Colts are 2-0. If Daniel Jones continues on this track, maybe you can take New Orleans out of the quarterback sweepstakes. But nothing in Daniel Jones's history suggests that he can put together a full season of high-level quarterback play. So that's obviously a wait and see. Indy is certainly a candidate to be in the quarterback sweepstakes, as are the Jets. They gave Justin Fields a 2-year contract. The Jets are 0-2. Fields played great in week 1, but was knocked out of week 2 with a concussion. He will miss week 3. Tyrod Taylor's going to start. I can't imagine a scenario whereby the Jets pass up an opportunity to draft a quarterback in the first round because they're married to Justin Fields. That feels like a short-term solution in New York. 5th team, the team that will host the draft next year, the Pittsburgh Steelers. We know they're in the quarterback market. They did a 1-year deal with 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers. That looks like it's going to be a one and done. If Aaron Rodgers continues to get beat up the way that he has, 7 sacks, 15 quarterback hits through just 2 weeks, this will absolutely be a one and done. And the Steelers have acquired a lot of draft capital to try to move up into the top 10, 8, whatever it takes in order to land their next franchise QB. They've not been able to solve that position since Ben Roethlisberger retired. And one more team, potentially. The Miami Dolphins might be in the market. They may be looking at a new head coach, an entirely new front office. They may be willing to part ways with Tua. He still has some years left on the contract extension he signed a couple of years ago. But I don't think that would exclude them from either trading him or moving on from him, or more likely drafting a quarterback in the first round. Miami, another team that looks like they may be in for a rough year. They could be looking at a top 5, top 8 pick in next year's draft as well. So you got at least those 6 teams. And again, who knows? There may be more. There may be more. And they were looking at a quarterback crop coming into this season that was thought to be loaded with quarterback prospects. You're probably familiar with the names. Arch Manning, he was supposed to be the headliner. Garrett Nussmeier, Cade Klubnik, Drew Aller, Lenora Sellers, DJ Lagway, Carson Beck. A lot of guys that people thought, hey, these are potential first rounders. But 3 weeks in, I think we can divide the group into 3, or the class into 3 groups. None of this is definitive. All of it is fluid. We're just assessing this where it stands at the moment. You have risers, you have fallers, and you have guys that are probably right around where you thought they would be when the season started. Let's put them into each category. All right, and we'll work our way up. All right, who have been the fallers? What quarterbacks 3 weeks into the season have underperformed and have people possibly reevaluating their draft stock? The most obvious answer, let's start with the big name, the guy at the top, Arch Manning. Everybody talked about how he was a lock to be the number 1 pick in next year's draft. They coined for teams that are trying to tank for Arch Manning, we coined the phrase planning for Manning, right? We're planning for Manning in 2026 because he is a surefire, can't miss franchise QB prospect. And 3 weeks in, the narrative on Arch Manning is now this guy needs to go back to school next year. He needs to play a lot of college football before he's ready for the NFL. The pressure, the expectations put on Arch Manning's shoulders, completely unrealistic. The name and the hype that name generated drove those expectations so sky high that entering the season opener against Ohio State, you would have thought that he was going to come in and roll the Buckeyes and put 50 on the scoreboard. And that was not the case. He was bad against Ohio State, had a bounce back performance in week 2, but this past week against, was it North Texas or UTEP? I can't remember. One of those Texas schools, smaller Division I school, either UTEP or North Texas. He was bad. You figured Texas would score 50. They scored 27. At one point, he missed 10 straight passes. And at halftime, as the Longhorns, in front of their home crowd, went to the locker room, they were roundly booed by the home crowd. The flaws in Arch Manning's game have been glaring. Mechanics, footwork, maybe not quite yet acclimated to the speed of the college game, seems to be a little bit late with everything. What that screams is this is a guy who needs more reps. So for me, and we're only 3 games in, there's a lot of football to play. If Arch Manning doesn't make significant progress, because they really haven't even gotten into the meat of the SEC schedule yet. They haven't even gotten into the schedule, much less the meat of it. He needs to go back to school. He needs to have some smart voices around him and that tell him, like, look, man, if you're serious about being a high NFL draft pick, then we need some more seasoning. Another guy whose draft stock has fallen, Cade Klubnik from Clemson. Definitely a guy who had a lot of preseason hype and thought to be potentially a top 10 pick, but the Tigers are off to a 1-2 start. There was no shame in Clemson's loss to LSU on opening week. Their defense is outrageously good, and they've already made 2 really good quarterbacks look bad. Their speed is just something I think that, especially early in the season when you're not yet acclimated, is problematic for quarterbacks. But I think the thing that has shown up about Cade Klubnik, particularly in Clemson's loss this past weekend to Georgia Tech, is that he doesn't have an elite trait that leaps out at you, that he does everything pretty well, but there's nothing elite about him. He doesn't have an elite arm. He doesn't have elite size. He doesn't have elite movement. He doesn't have elite processing and decision making. It's all good. It's all good. But none of it's elite. And if you're going to be a potential franchise quarterback in the NFL, there's got to be something that you do on an extraordinarily high level. And so far, Cade Klubnik hasn't shown that. Another guy whose draft stock has dropped so far, or potentially is dropping, DJ Langway, quarterback of Florida. Another individual who fell victim to the LSU defense this past weekend, 5 interceptions against LSU. And a couple of those were unbelievably poor decisions. He's scrambling out of the pocket to his right, running towards the sidelines, and then pivots and throws the ball all the way back into the middle of the field. Those types of interceptions that absolutely make offensive coordinators want to bash their head in with their own clipboard. I mean, that's the kind of stuff where you just go over it from day one. Don't throw back across your body into the middle of the field. 9 times out of 10, that ends poorly. So I think the thing that has shown up about DJ Langway so far is just poor decision making. He needs to make better decisions with the football. And if you're not making them at this level, then that doesn't bode well for your decision making at the next level. So I think those 3 guys, Manning, Langway, and Klubnik, have seen their draft stock potentially drop. Again, we're only 3 games in. This entire narrative can be rewritten by the time we get to November. But the early returns have not been good. Quarterbacks who are about where most people thought they were. You have Garrett Nussmeier of LSU, who some people are now, maybe by default, with Arch Manning's struggles, talking about as a potential number 1 pick. I've seen a lot of Brock Purdy comparisons, not in terms of his draft stock. Obviously, we know Purdy was the last guy taken in the draft, but in terms of his game. Whose game does, Garrett Nussmeier remind you of? I've heard a lot of people talk about he's Brock Purdy-ish, a good decision maker, a game manager, a guy that could probably make 3 or 4 big plays a game if you need him. Can you put the entire team on his back and have him carry you? Maybe not. But if you're a structured franchise with a good defense and you want a guy that isn't going to beat you and can probably get you, because of some big plays that he makes, a couple of wins a year, that sounds like the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? That sounds like what do the Pittsburgh Steelers need? They need that kind of quarterback. Garrett Nussmeier could be that guy. The offense hasn't been great so far. Brian Kelly, LSU's head coach, went on a rant in their post-game press conference last week about it when he was criticized for the offense. He later apologized over that rant. Nussmeier has been fine so far. He's been good. He outplayed Cade Klubnik. He outplayed DJ Langway, but maybe that was more a product of LSU's defense making them look bad than it was Nussmeier lighting the world on fire. Another guy who's kind of where you thought he would be, Drew Aller. He's in that conversation along with Nussmeier as a potential number one pick. He's got all the measurables. I mean, he looks like he was chiseled out of a quarterback, block of granite. 6'5" and 225 pounds with the big arm and all the elite traits. He's got the kind of Justin Herbert vibe, at least physically. But you really can't read much into Drew Aller this year because Penn State did not exactly tax themselves with their early season schedule. Their out-of-conference schedule has been Nevada, Florida International, and Villanova. How much can you read about Drew Aller against that competition? Not much. And then Lenora Sellers out of South Carolina, he's looked pretty good so far. But last week against Vanderbilt, he was injured, left the game, did not return. SC lost by 3 scores at home to Vandy. That's a bad look. So Sellers has been good, but what's his status going forward? That will be interesting to map. All right, let's end with this. Who have actually exceeded expectations? What quarterbacks are potentially risers? And I don't know if any of these guys, as a matter of fact, I'm going to say for certain, I don't believe for certain any of these guys are in play to be the number one overall pick. But they've all exceeded expectations so far and are now working their way into the conversation about first round picks. Carson Beck out of Miami, who left Georgia after some poor on-field play and some ridiculous off-field drama involving girlfriends and social media, etc. Carson Beck is focused less on his social media world and on driving fancy cars fast and more on playing quarterback. And he's got the U back there in the top 5. They're ranked 5th in the country right now. They're 3-0. They had a big win against Notre Dame. He's 65 for 82 on the season. That's almost 80%. I mean, Carson Beck has looked every bit what people thought when he was at Georgia Carson Beck could be. He's another guy, big, 6'6". He can move. He's got a big arm. At Georgia, decision-making was the issue. Too many interceptions, too many bad decisions. So far at Miami, 7 touchdowns, just 2 picks. Carson Beck trending in the right direction. John Mateer from Oklahoma, guy built more like Tim Tebow than Justin Herbert. 6'1", 225, kind of looks like a running back playing quarterback. I mean, he right now on the momentum of Oklahoma's big win over Michigan and some solid play so far is the current odds-on Heisman favorite. Is John Mateer a first-round draft pick, a franchise quarterback? It's way too early to say yes. Some people just don't think his game's going to translate to the NFL. At 6'1", 225, there are some shades of Jalen Hurts there, just maybe quite not as powerful as Jalen Hurts. A lot of people think he's more of a run-first quarterback. Again, probably not a franchise guy, but a guy whose stock has certainly risen. And one more name, a guy there wasn't much buzz about coming into the season, but Dante Moore at Oregon. And again, take this with a grain of salt. Oregon so far has played Montana State, a terrible Oklahoma State team, and Northwestern. But Dante Moore has lit it up, 50 out of 64. The accuracy of these guys these days is incredible. He's 6'3", 206 pounds, got great movement skills. I think he is what people thought Nico Iamaleava was going to be. You want to talk about a guy whose draft stock has tanked. Nico Iamaleava, first with the NIL drama, him leaving Tennessee, and now he's out on a terrible UCLA team who just fired their coach. I mean, that is a guy who, through bad advice and bad decision-making, has absolutely tanked his draft stock. But Nico Iamaleava, or I should say Dante Moore, who not quite as big as Iamaleava, he's 6'6", Dante Moore 6'3", 205, does things I think people thought Iamaleava was going to be doing. So a name to watch, Dante Moore, University of Oregon. Overall, if we had to answer the question, is the 2026 draft stock or draft class overrated? Again, way too early to tell. The early returns suggest, though, that there's no surefire quarterback in the bunch. There's not one guy in the bunch who you feel like you have to have on your football team. Like, if we get the chance to draft this guy, we are 100% taking this guy. There's no consensus number one. That player has not yet emerged. Is that because this group is all fairly competitive? Is that because this group truly lacks that stud, that surefire number one pick? That remains to be seen. All right, week 4 of college football is getting teed up. Week 3 of the NFL is getting teed up. And on tomorrow's Friday show, we will preview it all. We will break it all down with Pez on the hot route. So Pez will be back to talk about football and about life, previewing his best bets for week 3 and week 4 in college and other conversations about life in general. Love talking about all that stuff with Pez. So join us then. Until then, have a great day, everybody.